What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, One Pie Pizza, of course, and the only podcast also that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I am a little out of practice with that intro because we did not do an episode last week, and I'm also your host, Anthony Braska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. Want to get something out of the way before we dive into the meat of this episode. As John mentioned in the comments here, he says, I wonder if the tree will have Memorial Day colors. Didn't update the background in the tree yet. Had a lot going on. Almost didn't do an episode tonight. Got a lot of chaos happening I got a lot of chaos happening, I should say, going all around. So still Easter themed, but I still like that. Also, I think the pastels still kind of work for Mother's Day, which is upcoming this weekend. So it's part of why I left it. Kind of makes it work. The tree will be updated for Memorial Day next weekend. But the most important thing, well, the tree is the most important thing. But aside from that tree being the most important thing in this episode of Disguised Coverage, we are going to start to put a bow on the moves we've seen thus far in this offseason and start to work forward towards the actual start of the 2025 season and everything that comes with that. Training camp, preseason, regular season, the roster, the depth chart, the moves, everything that starts to kind of come together and function and coalesce as this team becomes the team that we will see. Appreciate you, John. John says, cool for Mother's Day. Good point. See, it all works. Well, all works. Appreciate you, John. Yeah, as we start to move forward here and really see what this team is going to be in 2025. We had all the waves of free agency and the contract extensions and then the draft prep and the draft. And there are still some things that could shake out as we move forward here in May and June and July. But then camp starts the end of July. We get preseason, we get regular season, all that kind of stuff. So for the most part, this roster for the Buffalo Bills in 2025 is pretty set. And you start to kind of look forward in terms of what this team is going to be in 2025 and the hows and the whys and all of it schematically, individually, all that stuff. I think it's important to start to have this conversation from a large scale and then break it down and get smaller and smaller and more niche as we go forward. So in tonight's episode, we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball where most of the attention has been given this offseason. Whether you're a fan of that, whether you're not a fan of that, feel free to let me know in the comments. Rightly or wrongly, the Bills defense has gotten a pretty significant overhaul, and depending on how positively or negatively you view the overhaul, they may have gotten some upgrades, and may just be some tweaks, and maybe even exchanges, depending on how you see it and how you feel. But between free agency and what the Bills have done in the draft, the defensive side of the ball has gotten a lot of attention and potential facelift for this season from an individual standpoint, from a schematic standpoint. And that's where we're going to focus on in this episode. I'm going to look at several position groups, players that are involved in those position groups. I'm going to talk about the defense as a whole, as Pops comes in and says, I'm still worried about an injury at linebacker. We will briefly talk about linebacker tonight, but it's a position group in linebacker that no jinx, we know what we're getting on the surface from a starter's perspective, right? We know what Terrell Bernard is. Maybe he continues to surprise us with what he can be and continues to improve. We know what Matt Milano is when he's healthy. And we saw some glimpses of what Dorian Williams can be and what he could potentially be as a third linebacker in this team, or if he has to step in and spot duty or maybe succeed Matt Milano next season. We're going to talk about safety a little bit. We're going to talk about interior defensive line, the edge grouping, the corner grouping. There's despite all of the moves on defense in the draft and free agency, and RJ comes in and says, all I can say is this defense best be better with all, and all is in all caps, all the resources spent on that side of the ball. And I think this is what kind of ties into that conversation. Like, given all the attention, all the resources that have been allocated to the defense, how much better will they be in 2025? Are they better? Where are they better? How? All that kind of stuff. I figured you would have some kind of thought with that, RJ. So that doesn't surprise me. But despite all the moves, and maybe RJ, this might not make you feel great. Despite all the moves, I still do think there are some questions and some variables and some unknown quantities, both positively and negatively, within this Bills defense. And that's what we're going to tie into this episode tonight and talk about in this episode tonight, along with a multitude of other things. So this episode continues to kind of set the table as we move forward. this offseason. And similar to what I did last year in the offseason for disguise coverage, we'll start to move forward and take a look at the roster as a whole, take a look at some schematic things that this team can do and be in 2025, how that ties into the trends we're seeing league wide, the past several years and from 2024. I'm also going to be doing some individual player deep dives, for several guys on the team that I think will be important for 2025, may have underachieved in 2024, may have some question marks going forward. So a lot to do in this offseason as we go forward here. But for now, we'll focus on the defensive side of the ball in this episode. And as I alluded to earlier, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, feel free to put it up into the chat at any single point in time. I will try to bring up anything and everything as humanly possible. Super chats get automatic priority because I respect the monetary donation, and the color attracts me like a cat with a laser pointer and pulls me away from my notes. So those will get brought up. And yeah, any thoughts you guys have, positively, negatively, lukewarm, whatever you got, player-wise, team-wise, league-wide, feel free to put it up into the chat. We'll make this episode as engaging as possible as we do on this show. RJ says, I'm curious how TJ Sanders compares to Dwayne Carter as a prospect overall, talent-wise, not play style. I just want to set correct expectations for Sanders and Jackson on the defensive line. I will be diving into that specifically when we get into interior defensive line. And RJ follows that up by saying, if I remember, Dwayne Carter was a prospect with some buzz going into the draft last year. I think it always depends on who you ask or where you go to for your draft content. You never know. Depending on where you go, I like Dwayne Carter, I think was like a top 3 or 4 defensive tackle for some folks last year. And then he was more of like a day 3 guy for some. I think it's a bit hit or miss depending on where you go. I don't remember too much. I kind of flush everything from prospect wise in terms of who evaluated who and how, aside from myself, once we move past. But we will get into the juxtaposition between him and Sanders, what it means for the defense, what it means for the defensive tackle grouping as a whole. So good question, RJ, and getting us started in that regard. And as always, if you folks are willing and able and would like to do so, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video if you have not already. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams and in terms of affecting the algorithm here on YouTube. So if you are kind enough and willing and able, please join us. Drop a like on this video and that will go a long way. All right, let's dive into the meat of this episode. We'll change the banner, which says, how much better will the Buffalo Bills defense be in 2025? So, grab this comment from Noah. Noah says, McDermott is the problem. Sorry, not sorry. I'm interested to see kind of what the perception of Sean McDermott is if the defense starts to come through a little bit in the playoffs, or if, like, I know Noah's not alone in this thought. I wonder if there's anything that can be done. Noah, feel free to answer if you think, if there's anything that would change your mind on that. Feel free to comment that. RJ says also, there's no way Carter can play one tech. At Micah's softball game, he looked like a linebacker at his size. He just looked extremely small. We're going to get into that. We're going to get, and then Joe Rosa literally at the exact same time says, hey guys, I'm late. Am I too late to push my Carter as 1T agenda? Yeah, it's absolutely, the boat is so gone on that. I'm just going to start with the interior defensive line. I was going to start with corner, but I'll start with the interior defensive line since the conversation piece is already there. Actually, no, I'm lying. I was already going to start with defensive tackle. That's what it shows in my notes. So, significant changes to the interior defensive line this offseason with what the Bills have done. And as you're sitting here looking at the depth chart, I'm not going to list out everybody. I'm just going to list the guys that I think right now have the best shot to play significant snaps for this team, provided there are, nothing goes sideways, no injuries, anything like that, no jinx. So right now we're looking at Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, and Dwayne Carter. As I'm sure most of you folks know, Larry Ogunjobi, he's got that 6-game suspension looming over his head. So that will play a role in the combination that we will see on the interior. Without Larry Ogunjobi, obviously you're looking at Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, TJ Sanders, Dwayne Carter, and then Deion Walker. And what I think is interesting, and I'm going to probably doing a focus episode on this position group as we start to go forward, I'm very interested to see who the odd man out is on the interior defensive line and what the rotation looks like from a usage standpoint and from a snap share perspective. I think we'll start at the top. Ed Oliver is Ed Oliver in terms of what he's going to be, right? 3 tech, penetrating, upfield, plays the run better than he gets credit for, but we know what he is within this defense, right? Positively or negatively, depending on how you view him. Daquan Jones, I think, starts the questions for this interior defensive line, both positively and negatively. I'm probably going to be saying that a lot in this episode. With Daquan, just to recap it, the past 2 seasons ago, before he tears his pec, man, I legitimately think he was on pace for an all-pro season. I don't know if he was going to continue the level that he was playing at before he got hurt, but he was on a tear as a pass rusher and as a run defender. Great season. Tears the pec, comes back for the playoffs, not so great, plays all of 2024. Doesn't reach the heights or the expectations that fans had for him, considering what he was the year before he got hurt, right? I still will maintain that I think Daquan Jones had a better 2024 than he gets credit for, but it wasn't the shades or the flashes of 2023 when he was potentially on pace for an all-pro season. But Daquan, I think, is where you start to get the questions. And then I see some comments there for Deon Walker. We're going to get into that in a bit. Jones is interesting because and I'm going to tie this with the position group that I've talked about all offseason. I still do think the interior defensive line needed more of a stout presence on the interior. They did not address that this offseason. They had an opportunity to. And if you believe Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State, who is very much a stout presence and a run-first type of interior defensive lineman, he was told by the Bills that if he was there at pick 30, he was going to be the Bills' pick at 30. He got taken 2 picks before they went by the Detroit Lions. So who knows what would have happened in that regard if he had been there. But according to Tyleik Williams, he would have been the pick. So it looked like the Bills may have potentially addressed that stout issue or lack thereof on the interior. They did not. They end up taking, they trade up in the second round to get a defensive tackle. It's not Alfred Collins. It's not Darius Alexander. It's TJ Sanders, who very much fits the mold. So all of these guys, and Walker included, who I'm going to talk about individually in this position group, despite how huge of a man Deon Walker is, he is not a stout anchoring type of player on the interior, despite being huge in every way, shape, and form. If you don't know how big, 99th percentile for height, 91st percentile for weight, 93rd percentile for wingspan, 83rd percentile for arm length, 88th percentile for hand size. Just an absolute mountain of a dude inside. Despite being that big, he is not a plugger. He's not this anchoring dude who's just going to muddy up the interior. He is a penetrator. He is a gap shooter. That's why I thought it was when they drafted him on day 3, I just tweeted a bunch of ha-has because it was so ironic that Bills fans have wanted a bigger guy and this bigger bodied size defender on the interior. And of course, the one that the Bills got was Deon Walker, who doesn't play to that size or didn't at Kentucky at the least. But we're going to get into his specific breakdown in a bit as we go forward here. But if you look at the interior, we essentially have what we've had in the past. Penetrators, gap shooters, guys that lean towards more inside rush than they do run defense. I do think the top 4, when you remove Ogunjobi's suspension, I do think the top 4 are set. I think it's whatever rotation we go through. I think it's Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders. What I think is interesting about Daquan Jones is ideally I wanted someone who was more stout that could start alongside Ed Oliver and then give you the opportunity to put Daquan Jones as more of defensive tackle 3 in the rotation. Have him be one of the second wave guys instead of playing up on the first wave along with Ed Oliver. But given how they've constructed the rest of the defensive tackle room, I think what you can do with Daquan is have him be more of an early down defender, have him be a guy that focuses more on the run. And then if you get to those, when you get to those known passing down in distances and situations and true dropbacks, then you can have that interior be Ed and Ogunjobi or Ed and TJ Sanders or Ogunjobi and Sanders, a multitude of combinations inside. You could kick Michael Hoyt inside. You could kick Landon Jackson inside, depending on who makes what and how things go, right? You could even potentially kick Bosa inside or Groot inside, depending on what they want to do. I think they've set themselves up for more of an inside rush presence, which is no shock there, given all the 3 techs they have and what Brandon Beane said after the draft. But we look on this team, really the only true 1 tech from a starter's perspective, depending on how you view Zion Logue or Ilianku still, I'm not counting those guys further down the depth chart. The really only true one tech they have is Daquan Jones. Now, yes, Larry Ogunjobi can moonlight there a little bit. TJ Sanders can moonlight there a little bit, especially if he plays heavier. His weight has fluctuated in positive ways, right? Like he's played anywhere from 290 to 305 or 300. Apparently he's around 305 or 310 right now, so maybe he stays at that weight. And if he does and can maintain the violence and pop and juice that he plays with, I am all for it. But being even said, his primary position would be more of 3 tech, and then he tried to walk it back like 2 days later. But I do think when you look at the top 4, Ogunjobi suspension not being discussed, it's Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, and TJ Sanders, which leaves defensive tackle 5 being a conversation between Dwayne Carter and Deon Walker. What I think is interesting for Walker, and let's see where RJ even said it. He said, I think Walker is more of a project. He needs to completely change his body position, I think even composition, and gain weight in his tiny stick legs. RJ also said, I don't understand how they can't teach someone that's 6'7" and 340 pounds not being able to 2-gap. You're ginormous. Coaching should be able to teach him how to be a giant plugging monster. So this is interesting though, right? And Pop said it too. Hard for a 6'7" guy to stay low, especially if he has back problems causing a leverage problem. That's part of it. Like his physical makeup is part of his play style. And yes, granted, you could coach a guy and tweak a guy a little bit. And if he grinds hard enough, he can improve his pad level a little bit. But so much of what he's going to be is tied to what you guys have said in the comments already. And really what has kind of been floated around a bit since draft day. I know I put out several pieces on it. So much of Deon Walker is going to be if he can do enough with body composition and health. He's got a defect in his vertebrae that is a serious issue. It caused him problems in 2024. But even without that, and RJ alluded to it, he's an interesting case study. And I'm just going to go off my evaluation from my notes here. He is a top heavy player with lean legs and like a very lean lower body in general. You see how big he is. If he weighs 330 pounds, it looks like 280 of that is from his stomach up. Like he's got a lean lower body. So part of the back issues that you have with him is not only that he has a defect in his vertebrae, which is significant, but also the way he's carrying his weight is also not helpful for his lower back and or just how he kind of plays. But we'll continue to go through his evaluation. So top heavy with lean legs. He also plays high. The combination of being top heavy, having a lean lower body, and playing high will lead to him getting displaced. You will see him get knocked off the ball and get driven back 3, 4, 5 yards vertically, right? Like straight back. You'll also see him struggle to anchor horizontally. If there's a zone run and he starts to get washed down, it's hard for him to kind of anchor and stop just getting completely washed down the line. You can improve some of that, right? With pad level, with block recognition and understanding and all of that, more awareness. But at the end of the day, the way he's built doesn't lend itself to certain aspects of play style in a similar way to Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau is never going to be this change of direction monster, bendy, dips, like centered, athletic edge. You are not going to see Greg Rousseau dipping and bending and running the arc and ghosting underneath tackles' hands because that's not how he's built. And similarly, you're not going to see certain guys who are smaller and dippy and more bend to their game. You're not going to see them play with the length and the compression that Greg Rousseau plays with. So it's different, right? I think Walker's body composition and frame speaks a lot to how he played at Kentucky, which is one gapping, penetrating, getting upfield. I do think he has the length and the size to 2-gap a little bit more, but he's got to be more consistent with his hand usage, more consistent with taking advantage of that arm length. What's also interesting with him in Kentucky, a lot of alignments that he played in along that front. So a 4, a 4-eye, a 3, a 5, a wide 9. For those who don't know, essentially he lined up everywhere from outside the tackle to head up on the center. So I didn't even mention zero tech, which is what he did as well. Even to wide 9, like lining up like spots outside the tackle and like kind of outside a tight end if a tight end was there. Even if the tight end's not there, like imagine like a ghost player there next to the tackle, tackles the end man on the line, ghost man, and then Walker. They used him all over the place, which speaks to how light he is on his feet and how much he's more of a penetrator and a shooter than he is a stout anchor in the middle meat and potatoes type of guy. He's got good quickness in short areas, especially for his size. Again, more of a penetrator than a plugger. His go-to move is a quick swim, either right on the snap or right after it. He does a decent job recognizing gap scheme runs with pullers and zone blocking. He's inconsistent in disengaging from blocks in both the run and the pass. He lets blockers into his body, doesn't make regular use of his length. He also gets laid into his stance a lot. You'll see him just getting into his stance and the ball is snapped and it leaves him in disadvantageous positions. And then, as I also mentioned, he'll get washed down versus zone. Not the best horizontal anchor, potentially due to frame and or build. So all that being said, if they can get him to reshape his body enough and get his back into a healthy enough spot, and those are huge ifs, right? If Deion Walker can reshape his body enough and reproportion some of that weight and some of that build, change his body composition, which is a significant ask. And if his back is good enough and healthy enough, something Brandon Beane already spoke to, like he already spoke the day after they drafted him or the day of, him being picked, talking about, we want to take care of his back. You might not see him a ton this offseason. You might not see him at training camp. If you don't, this is why, so on and so forth, all these pieces. So they're already trying to get out in front of that potential, not even potential defect, because it is a defect. They're already trying to get out in front of that being an issue for them, which is understandable. And with their medical staff, with the way that they've kind of helped guys back in the past, with the way they've previously been good with injury prevention and injury maintenance and recovery and all that kind of stuff, you would think positively, if you want to have, err on the side of positivity or glass half full. Like Kent says here in the comments, Walker's only 21. He's now in the NFL with the best doctors, strength coaches, and regular coaches. He has a good chance to thrive. Sure. Glass half full. That is definitely a possibility. What I think is tough is it's still a large ask because you have to be getting someone to change their body composition while also maintaining and trying to strengthen a defect in their vertebrae is a large ask. We'll see if he can do it, and as people, talk about the 2023 tape was better than the 2024 tape. I still do think the issues that he struggled with on the 2024 tape are on the 2023 tape. He's getting displaced. He's playing high. So it's not all just, it's because the back injury and because the back injury. It's not just because of the back injury. Like he is who he is, for better or for worse, even before the back injury was what it was. But I digress. To say all those things, if he can reshape his body enough and get his back into a good enough shape, which both of those are large ifs, I can see him surpassing Dwayne Carter on the interior depth chart. And as Bob says here, just ask AJ Epinesa. That's a good point. Like, look how much work it took for AJ Epinesa to change his body type and play style. Maybe Walker doesn't have to change his play style as much, but how much body changing Epinesa had to do from a workout standpoint, from a diet standpoint, changing everything. He was still working on it several seasons into his career. And that was without, having a back defect or a vertebrae defect. We'll see what it means for, Walker. And again, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade if you like Walker, especially Joe, who I know loves Walker, and Dwayne Carter. Man, you sure know how to pick him at defensive tackle. He could be the prince that was promised and everything could work out. I just do think it is a lot of ifs and a lot of hope. Does that mean it won't happen? Absolutely not. But there is a lot of question marks around that. Either way, if Carter can hold off Walker, or if Walker can't get himself into the shape that he needs to, obviously that looms better for Dwayne Carter. But I really do think there's a good chance that even though he's only going into his second year, like if you tell me that Dwayne Carter gets cut, I am not surprised at all. And part of it is because of just what does his home look like on the interior defensive line now? Again, we've talked about the interior being gap shooters, penetrators, all that kind of stuff. Right before they took Walker, after day 2, Brandon Beane said, this would kind of move, Dwayne to more of the backup one tech behind Daquan Jones. He mentioned if they got more of a plugger, then he would still be more of a three tech. It just seems like he's kind of the odd man out. And they were like, well, here's what we're going to do, and we'll have him adjust accordingly. The issue now with having Ed and having Ogunjobi and having TJ Sanders, all of those guys are better three techs than Dwayne Carter. And Dwayne Carter, even if he bulked up, like it's not a size issue, like I don't see him as a one tech, especially with how he struggled last year against the run. He was just getting blown off the ball horizontally, vertically, individual blocks, double team blocks, like base blocks, a multitude of things. He's just getting knocked out of gaps and knocked out of holes left and right, which is troublesome. And his calling card coming out of Duke was, he fits the bills because he's a one gap guy. He's a penetrator. He's a shooter, pass rush, inside rush type of guy. So I wanted to discuss some metrics for him and speak on why he could get cut. Again, if Walker can get his health and his body into the shape that it needs to be. Even if not, even if Walker doesn't pan out, I don't think they'd cut both of them or get rid of both of them. But either way, I think it's going to be hard for Dwayne Carter or for Deion Walker to get into that top four once Ogunjobi's suspension is lifted. With Ogunjobi suspended, I think you're probably looking at Ed, Daquan, Sanders, Carter, or Walker. We'll see from there. But then once Ogunjobi comes back, Carter and Walker are both fighting for roster spots. That's the way it is at this point. So some metrics for last year. There were 151 interior defensive linemen that had at least 100 snaps. Dwayne Carter was 119th in pass rush productivity. Also, out of those 151 interior defensive linemen, he was 146th in pass rush win rate, measured by PFF. And that is pressures plus beaten defenders minus unblocked pressures, and then divided by the total pass rush snaps. And then from a run defense standpoint, there were 153 qualifying interior defensive linemen with at least 20% of run defense snaps last year. Dwayne Carter was 126th in stop percentage. His issue coming out of Duke was, displacement against the run and run defense in general, right? Kind of getting knocked around a little bit. Like I mentioned, his calling card, or what you wanted to see, what he could hang his hat on, or what you thought he would hang his hat on based on the tape at Duke and based on his skill set, was being a pass rush guy, like the ability to penetrate, get to the quarterback. He was never at Duke this guy that was going to eat up blocks and handle double teams and anchor and do all this stuff on the interior that a one tech would do. So hearing Brand and then seeing how he played as a rookie and struggled against the run, and then knowing what he was at Duke, I find it very, 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 very hard to see Dwayne Carter being a viable one tech on a good interior defensive line. Like, he could be a one tech for someone if he just need to get a body there. And that's with the Bills. Again, the Bills don't gravitate towards stout guys, despite the Tyreek Williams conversation. Even with Daquan Jones, they had him shed weight when he came to the Bills. Daquan Jones has played between like 307 and 310 pounds. Like, that's how big they like their one techs. So they're not looking for guys that are like 315, 320, 325. Again, Tyreek Williams caveat. So they're okay if their one techs are 305 or 310, or if even like Larry Ogunjobi, like guys that are more like, 3-4 defensive ends previously, but can be more of a three tech, but can moonlight a little bit as one tech. That is kind of what they go for and they gravitate towards. So that overshadows this whole conversation, right? It's not even, Dwayne Carter's not a one tech. He could be a one tech for the Bills, like just with the size and the type of play style they look for. It's not just the size, it's the play style on top of it. The issue is, I don't think he's shown anything from a play style standpoint that makes you think he can be a consistent one tech or even a consistent three tech. Like, especially with what they did on the interior, if Walker's good to go, it makes me think Carter is cut, or they're just going to waive him or put him on the practice squad, see whatever they can do. Like, I don't see him making the roster if Walker shapes up to be what they want. If Walker doesn't, then you've got Carter there waiting in the wings, and he can be a rotational guy however you need him. Either way, I just don't see him, as of this moment, being a significant contributor to this team in 2025 or beyond, unfortunately for him. And especially when you pair in with how 2024 went, and again, just with some of the metrics, I'm not going to repeat them again, but you're minimal in terms of pass rush pop. You're minimal in terms of run defense. So was Austin Johnson. That second wave was an issue. You've upgraded that second wave with Ogunjobi and Sanders already. But Austin Johnson struggled last year. He's gone. They brought in Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson, two guys who are, one, no longer on the team right now, and two, who were brought in off the scrap heap from other teams, and they both beat Carter out for snaps when it mattered most down the stretch. So it isn't even just my analysis or my thought. I think the team is also telling us they don't necessarily believe in Dwayne Carter at this point and kind of hedge their bets with what they went after. So at the end of the day, they've still opted against a stout presence inside. Again, Deion Walker is not a stout presence, went through his evaluation. They've opted for more juice and penetration and inside rush, which is their MO and which is their archetype. I'm very interested to see what TJ Sanders can be. I'm very excited to kind of get first eyes on him at camp and see him in the preseason. I liked his tape. I had him pegged for the Bills before they signed Larry Ogunjobi. If you follow me on Twitter or seen the shows I did during draft weekend, I just thought once they drafted Ogunjobi, they would lean more towards a truer type of one tech. But again, like I said, they went with, the archetype is the archetype. They went with juice and penetration and violence and pop, and that is what TJ Sanders is. He also can two gap a little bit and play some gap and a half, but he's, again, not the biggest dude, has a bit of a narrower base, can get displaced now and again, but there's a lot to like with TJ Sanders' game. I'm very excited to see him play. But he's much more in that Ed Oliver mold than anybody on the inside. And Ogunjobi, and Ed Oliver, I think, are all different shades and variations of one another. Even Walker is just a larger version of all of them, just a little less juice, a little less pop, but the idea is the same. The philosophy is the same. One gapping, penetration, all that kind of stuff. Sanders is just more violence, more quickness, more juice, more technique, a lot of fun pieces. It'll be interesting to see what we get from this interior defensive line this year. Overall, answering the question, though, in terms of how much better will the Buffalo Bills defense be in 2025, I think we start with these individual position groups. I do think the interior defensive line is significantly better than last year. Not necessarily, am I talking out of both sides of my mouth here? Not necessarily because I think Sanders is going to be amazing and Ogunjobi is going to be amazing. I do think they're going to be good. But more so just what they got from the second wave last year was just so not good. Austin Johnson was very ineffective. Dwayne Carter was very ineffective. Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson, I know depending on who you follow, they had some good pass rush metrics, but it's really because of small sample size than it is actual effectiveness. If you watch the tape, they were also not good. Aside from Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, you did not really get NFL caliber play on the interior of the Bills defensive line last year consistently. I think they've made significant strides towards getting that this year. I think once Ogunjobi comes back from the suspension, you've got a fine top four with Ed, Daquan, Ogunjobi, and Sanders. Then I think you get Ed and Daquan on early downs. And then on third down or pass rushing down in distances and situations, you take out Daquan. And then you've got a three-man rotation from a pass rush, inside rush, and juice perspective between Ed, Ogunjobi, and Sanders. So you let Daquan just feast against the run, work against the run. That should keep him fresher as the season goes along. I think also kind of having him niche down helps the interior defensive line in addition to helping him. And then let Sanders and Ogunjobi and Ed work the regular rotation amongst themselves and Daquan. But when it comes to the passing stuff or true drop back situations, you let the inside rush guys hunt. And that's just from an interior perspective. That's not even talking about rotating in the edge guys and all those pieces and then the versatility up front and all the things they can do. But I do think they got better. And it's just a question of, I think there's more questions on the back end than there is on the top. I do think the top four is set. Ed, Daquan, Ogunjobi, Sanders. Ogunjobi suspended for the first 6 games, so we'll see who steps in. Is it Carter? Is it Walker? Even if, Ogunjobi wasn't suspended, it's still interesting to see kind of what happens on the back end of that D-line. Because if Walker can get himself into shape, I think he surpasses Carter just based on what Carter's tape was last year and what some of the breadcrumbs the Bills are dropping around Carter kind of means a little bit. Also within that, Larry Ogunjobi's on a 1-year deal. So if Carter can, get himself in a good spot with the team, or if Walker can, you would like that because, again, Ogunjobi's gone next year. Daquan Jones is on the last year of his deal. So you have questions at defensive tackle going into next year. It would be nice if you had some semblance of a core between Ed and Sanders and Carter and Walker, or Ed and Sanders and one of Carter or Walker. Someone's going to get an opportunity on the back end between Carter and Walker to win a spot. And I think one could force the other one out unless they, have some roster gamesmanship when it comes to injury and IR spots and all of that kind of stuff. I got a super chat here from Carl. Carl says, first of all, thank you for being here, Carl. Thank you for the super chat. Carl says, if you are so down on Deion Walker, can you explain why Bean had a first-round rating on him in 2023? Can he be what Brandon Bean saw in him again? So first thing, one, everybody evaluates people differently, and not even just for me, right? Like I do this here as essentially a part-time job, but something I love and I study. Brandon Bean does this professionally. But even aside from that, professional people, scouts, GMs, coaches, you could show one guy's tape to 10 different people and you could get 10 different grades and evaluations. So people see things differently. They value certain things differently. I will say, I think the ceiling is what is intriguing about Walker, because at the size that he is, how light he is on his feet and how he moves is just very, very, very intriguing. He's almost got like some bounce to him with how he moves and athleticism and the multiple alignment possibility. So if you can change some of that body composition, repurpose some of that weight, he could be a really impactful guy. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a 60%, 70% snap share guy, but I think he's somebody who could have an impact. The issue that I have is I just think he's more of a one style kind of guy, not necessarily a one trick pony, but that's the one style and the trick that the Bills like on the interior. So he fits their archetype. He fits what they like. And if you can clean him up a little bit, right, from a body standpoint and from a health standpoint, and, if you believe in yourself from a technique standpoint, right, we can teach him to use his length better, to teach him to use his hands better. We can get him, better from the neck up in terms of recognition and diagnosis and all that stuff. If they really believe in him like that, that'll change the grades too. I think also what's a big thing as well, player interviews go a long way towards determining grades. And I'm not interviewing these players and I'm not behind the scenes with them. So I don't know them as people. I can just watch on the tape. And I know there were some other people too. There were a couple people I talked to this offseason who had had Walker as like a top 10 player going into this year. So again, he's a huge dude, but he moves very nimbly and light and bouncy. I think that attracts a lot of people, presents a high ceiling for some. I just think there's cause for concern given the pad level he plays with, the leaner frame. I just think there's a lot to be done there. And as Noah says here, he says Walker has untapped potential. I think you can make that case. I just think there's a lot that goes into tapping into that potential. I don't think it's necessarily like, here's a good example, right? Like Greg Rousseau was a big, like untapped potential type of guy. I thought his path towards being a successful NFL player was more attainable than Walker's is, which is part of why you took Rousseau in the first and you take Walker on day 3. But just kind of put that into perspective as well. But yeah, I do think there's potential there for Walker. I just don't know how likely it is that he hits it. And I do think there are some red flags that are going to be hard to clean up and fix within him just because of how he's built. Even if he fixes the weight, even if he gets the back issue, under control, those things will help with the red flags and the concern, mainly playing high and the leaner frame and how that leads to displacement. But I do still think there are going to be some causes for concern there. But again, if you've got him within a solid rotation, I think there's an opportunity for him to be a rotation player. And yeah, so at the end of the day, interior defensive line, I do think they've gotten better on the interior, and we'll see what happens on the back end. Camp will be really interesting to see how Walker shows up, if he gets put on IR, if he's practicing, how much he is, how much he isn't. And Dwayne Carter is going to get a real opportunity. Like this offseason is very big for Dwayne Carter, and this season is very big for Dwayne Carter because Ogunjobi is suspended for those first 6 games, and there's a chance that Walker gets put on the IR or they just handle him with kid gloves as they try to get his body into the healthiest state possible. So Dwayne Carter's going to get an opportunity. We'll see what he does with that opportunity. But at the end of the day, with Ogunjobi, I do think this is a much better top four this year of Ed, Daquan, Ogunjobi, Sanders versus last year's group of Ed, Daquan, Austin Johnson, and Dwayne Carter. So better on the interior, still operating in that same type of mold, though. One gap, penetrating, get upfield, shoot gaps, havoc plays, try and cause chaos in the backfield. You're still going to have some issues with displacement. You're still going to see some guys get blown off the ball. You're still going to see the Bills defense get gashed on the interior unless they use numbers to stop the run. But I do think they will get more of the offense just as much as they get got. Sanders and Ogunjobi, for as much as they'll get knocked off the ball a little bit by double teams, they're also going to get theirs by penetrating and shooting the gaps and causing problems in the backfield and just being violent on the interior. So upgrade on the interior, which is a very good thing to see. The inside rush took a step up. The inside run defense took a step up. It's still not where I'd like it to be from defending from a light box perspective, but it's still saw some improvement. And then the inside pass rush saw a large improvement with Ogunjobi and Sanders. So overall, very positive on the inside. As Mike says, Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper both had Walker outside their top 50s. Yeah, depending on who you ask, every evaluator is different. Every team is different. Who knows if the Bills don't take Walker there? Who knows when he goes? Maybe the Bills valued him higher than everyone else. Maybe someone else, valued him the same or even higher. They just didn't have the resources. You never know. But yeah. Oh, Gage says, any chance we see some 3-4 fronts or special dime, big nickel type stuff? Anything hybrid? I hope so. I really, really, really hope so. Especially with, we're going to get to the edge position now, especially with how the edge grouping is built. I hope so. But I've done this dance like every year, and I don't want to get my hopes up too much of being like, yeah, they're going to do more hybrid fronts and they're going to get more exotic and we'll see more sims and creepers and 5-man rushes and 6-man rushes and more effective games and stunts and all this stuff. I don't want to get my hopes up. I would think so because there is a lot of hybrid potential on the interior and on the outside, but I hope so. Noah says, I really wish this regime would change their way on defensive tackles. I don't want them to completely change it. I just would like a tweak. Yeah, but the archetype is the archetype, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. All right, now let's continue this conversation on the defensive line. Let's move towards edge. So on the interior defensive line, I think my highlight was significant changes and improvements to the second wave and the rotation on the interior defensive line. With edge, I think what they've done this year is really just increase the versatility and the depth. I still think there's questions from a top end or a top tier perspective, which we're going to talk about here. But at the minimum, you have increased the depth and the versatility at this group. So of this group. So right now you have a top 6 edge grouping. Again, I'm not going to read off everybody from the depth chart perspective, but as of this moment, you got Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, Michael Hoyt, Landon Jackson, and Javon Solomon. Now, much like defensive tackle and Larry Ogunjobi having that 6-game suspension, Michael Hoyt, free agent acquisition from the Los Angeles Rams, is also serving a 6-game suspension. So that'll impact this grouping a little bit. Already got some love here. Curtis saying Landis. I read Curtis and Landon, and I combined them, and I said Landis. Curtis saying Landon Jackson was my favorite pick. Kent says he wants to bring Groot inside once in a while. I love that idea. Paisan says he wants Zadarius Smith. RJ over here saying, I'm definitely more of a fan of this year's top 3 picks as opposed to last year. I love Hairston, like Sanders, and love Jackson. I hated the Keon pick, hated the Bishop pick, and was okay with Carter. Well, hopefully it works out better for you. Ralph says the new defensive coaches suggest some new schemes are coming. Yes, I do expect changes on the defensive line. And from a blitz standpoint, simulated pressures, creepers, and 5-man games, just given Ryan Nielsen's track record, especially with what he did with Atlanta. I know him as defensive coordinator with Jacksonville was bad last year, but they had a ton of injuries. The 2023 Falcons tape was really fun schematically. So when he was their defensive coordinator, so I'm hoping we get some of that. Not to mention, I forget his name all the time, the defensive backs coach that came over from New England, all the man they played, all the cover one they played. I do think there are, I just think there's tweaks that are coming. I don't know how much is going to change from a percentage standpoint or a usage standpoint, but I do think we will see tweaks and changes to the defense. I just don't know in what capacity. But let's go through here with this edge grouping. I think as of right now, you have two main questions, or at least I have two questions, but I think there's two questions here surrounding this edge grouping as of right now. And the first is, who's going to be edge one from a pass rush perspective? I still don't think Greg Rousseau is there yet. I think he can be. He's improved every year incrementally, marginally, however you want to verbalize it. He has made strides every year as a pass rusher in his moveset, his plan, his understanding. I still don't think he's a true edge one as a pass rusher, though. And even just looking at some of his, I know some people come through and be like, look at all the pressures that he had. 28 of his pressures came in 3 games last year against the Jags, Titans, and Lions, surprisingly. The Lions have a great offensive line, but he ate in that game. Jacksonville and Tennessee, not so much. So a majority of his production came in 3 games, which is still impressive, right? You have multiple games where, in those 3 games, 11 pressures, 8 pressures, 9 pressures. So he has the opportunity to become like a game wrecker against certain levels of competition. I would like to see that continue game by game. Reduce the games where there's 0 pressures, 1 pressures, 2, and get to that spot where you can be more consistent and not just feast and live from a volume standpoint off a couple games here and there. Now, I do think if he gets better running mates at the edge spot and on the interior, that also helps him. If TJ Sanders can be what he projects to be, if Ogunjobi can be what they need him to be, if Ed continues to be a factor on the inside, and then depending on what you get from Bosa, depending on what you get from Jackson, Solomon, Hoyt when he comes back from his suspension, I do think the supporting cast helps Greg Rousseau more as a pass rusher this year. But as of right now, I think he's a very solid edge 2 as a pass rusher. But even within some of the metrics, I still don't think he's a true edge 1 as a pass rusher. Now, still top tier, legit edge 1 versus the run. One of the best run defending defensive linemen, let alone edges in the entire NFL. So tremendous. So again, that edge 1 conversation, who is edge 1 as a rusher? I think there's 2 possibilities within that. Is it Greg Rousseau? Does he make that leap? Does he have another season of making improvement as a pass rusher and he becomes a true overall edge 1? Or is it Joey Bosa? Just from the rest of the group, I don't see AJ Epinesa being the edge 1 as a pass rusher. I don't see it being Hoyt. I don't see it being Jackson. I don't see it being Solomon. I think if they're going to have a true edge 1 as a pass rusher, it's either Greg Rousseau making that leap or it's Joey Bosa staying healthy. If Bosa's healthy, I think it's him. But the health is a big question. Obviously, we know this. I'm not going to dive into too much of it. But if Bosa can stay healthy, whether it's stuff the Bills training staff does with him, or if it's the snap count and the usage, and he doesn't have to play as many early downs to stop the run like he did with the Chargers, whatever the combination is, if he stays healthier with the Bills, I do think he can be an edge 1 as a pass rusher. That aspect of his game is still there. Might be a lower tier. It might not be, top 5 or top 10 pass rushing edge like he was in his prime with the Chargers, but I still do think he can be a legit edge 1, maybe just a lower mid-tier edge 1, depending on how things fall, if they all fall the right way for him. So that first question with the edge grouping is who is going to be edge 1? Or do they have an edge 1 as a pass rusher? I think it's either group taking the leap or it's Joey Bosa staying healthy. The second question that I have with the edge grouping is who steps up from essentially everyone else, but I just labeled it who steps up from the depth. Is Michael Hoyt a chess piece game wrecker? Do they line him up kind of like what the Rams did and use him in that spinner role where he's lining up off the edge? He's at off-ball linebacker. He's blitzing. He's lining up over the center. He's in the A-gap. He's stunting. He's looping. He's spiking. Like all these things. Do they use him that way? Or is he just a force off the edge? Does AJ Epinesa round back into more of a rush form, or is he more of just an early down snap eater playing the run like he was last year? What does Landon Jackson give you as a rookie? Is Javon Solomon a thing? Who steps up from that grouping, but also who steps up with Michael Hoyt's suspension? Does his suspension open the door for someone to fill a role or fill a spot and not let go? Overall, with the edge grouping, I don't think this group is top tier, but I think they've got a good mix of role and depth potential. And if they can just get Greg Rousseau to take a jump or get Bosa to stay healthy, I think that could really kind of push this group over towards being a strong aspect of this team. I think Groot taking a jump or Bosa staying healthy, if they get both those things, that's amazing. But Groot taking a jump or Bosa staying healthy, they could have a quality unit that can provide impact in a multitude of ways up front, which is exciting. So overall, I do think this edge grouping is better than they were last year. I see Bosa as an improvement over Von Miller. I know some people will hang on the metrics for Von. I don't think the metrics spoke to what the tape was. He had some really good flashes, but I don't think his tape was as strong as some of the metrics would indicate. And I do think they've upgraded at the edge spot. We'll see how much. A lot of that is going to be tied to what kind of tier they get from the top guys, being Bosa and Groot against the pass. As far as defending the run, I got no concerns. AJ Epinesa has become a good run defending edge. Groot's a good run defending edge, or a great one, actually. Michael Hoyt can defend the run. Landon Jackson can defend the run. Like, I'm not worried about the edge grouping playing the run at all. It's just more of what did they get from a pass rush standpoint. But I do think they've improved the edge grouping versus last year. Ralph says, is Hoyt the next Lorenzo Alexander? He could be. I like that idea. I like that, kind of monster man, chess piece, spinner role being back in this defense. Kent says, I really don't like the idea of not knowing our D-line identity for 6 weeks and then trying to figure it out from there. I also don't like that either. But, if the Bills got to figure it out and we got to figure it out, maybe other teams have to figure it out too. What else? There were some comments I wanted to get to. K. Mori says, late to the show. Is this the Sabres therapy session? I refuse to acknowledge the Sabres aside from that comment, but fair enough. RJ says, Ed Oliver only plays well against good competition. It has to be a coaching thing, right? This trend goes back years as well. He just doesn't step up against bad O-lines. He's performed against a multitude of guys, both good and bad, quality and not quality. I think the biggest thing is he's just gone away when the lights have been the brightest. Just play. Not the Bengals game, there were coverage aspects and issues that kind of messed up the defensive line, but then just getting waxed by Tooney 2 seasons ago in the divisional round was unfortunate. He did play really good in the AFC Championship. Ed Oliver had a very good AFC Championship and was one of the bright spots on defense against the run, against the pass. I think with his size, you're going to get that fluctuation. You're going to have games where he's crushing it and games where it's not. He's an outlier from a size perspective, so I think that outlier leads to ebbs and flows in his performance. But we'll see. Charles says, is Hoyt an edge or a linebacker or both? I'm hoping he's more of that spinner type role where you don't know where he's coming from. I want to see him everywhere. I want him lined up at edge. I want him lined up at off-ball linebacker and blitzing. I want him dropping into coverage every now and again as they run simulated pressures and creepers. I want him lined up in the A-gap and spiking and taking out guards and centers. I want him doing everything up front. Like, I think he is a solid chess piece. I don't think he's this A-tier, completely change your whole defense type of chess piece, but he is a quality chess piece. I hope they use him everywhere. Ken says, my question is, how many snaps does Bosa average in the regular season? Oh, I feel like it's going to depend on the game script for me, but I would think like 25 to 40, depending on the game. Yeah, and I would keep that horse in the stables unless I absolutely need him. I want to talk about Landon Jackson briefly because I know several folks in the chat really like him. I'm lukewarm on Landon Jackson. Please don't yell at me. Please don't get upset. And it's mainly just I'm very wary of guys that are high cut, and he is a high cut guy. It's not just that he's tall. It's that he's tall, but like majority of his height comes from his leg length. He has a shorter type of torso. He's a very long guy with his legs. He's very high cut. And that when guys are built that way, it tends to lead to minimal lower body flexibility. And that's what you have with him. So he's high cut with minimal lower body flexibility. And you really see that when he tries to turn the corner, try and run the arc or try to transition on play action. Really violent hands. He loves the jumping or the Euro step cross chop where he gets that cross arm in and pairs it with a club and then rips right through. Good linear explosion. That's where you see that RAS score. He tested off the charts with, broad jump and the vertical jump. Those are explosion measuring tests at the combine. And you see that he is again, he's not this big change of direction marvel, this loose, bendy, fluid type of athlete, but he is a straight line, explosive guy. Line him up out wide and let him just go through somebody, use his violent hands and his length and his explosion and just go through people or set an edge or not get displaced. Multiple alignment opportunities. He was used all over the defensive line in Arkansas. Not as much as Walker, but still a good amount. A lot of stunt work as a spiker. Games up front. He slants a bunch. His pass rush counters and transitions need work. I think that also ties into him being high cut and playing, with that lower body type of stiffness. You will see him kind of play upright and play high a little bit, similar to Walker, which is decently understandable considering Landon Jackson 6'6" and Deion Walker 6'7". So again, playing a little high, them being high cut, a little bit of lower body stiffness. So that's some cause for concern. And then how that affects his pass rush counters, his transition, his plan, his moves in general. Really forceful tackler. He brings his whole body through contact. He's trying to bury dudes on contact. And with that linear explosion, this is one of my big parts of my notes here, that linear explosion should yield better speed to power, like him bull rushing guys, him going through guys and driving them back into the quarterback's lap. But he gets stalled out because of how upright he plays. So when you want to see somebody, if the tackle is like this, you want to see him be more like that and get into him, not completely horizontal, but play with more leverage and be able to go through and knock him back. Instead, he kind of plays more upright. So then it's just force hitting force, and you kind of see him stall out a bit. But if they can change his pad level a little bit, get him to play with a bit more lean, play with a bit more leverage, I'm excited to see what he can be. I was not a big fan of his, again, high cut guys scare me from a play style standpoint, but I think he fits the archetype. I think the value is potentially really good considering they got him in the third. I forget where he was on my edge rankings. I'm saying this now as I stall to go back and look into my notes because I posted them all. Where was he? He was edge 8 for me in this draft class. So again, I think he's got some stuff to offer. It's just high cut guys like that scare me in terms of what they can be. I think his future and projection and trajectory in the NFL is like a high tier edge 3 to maybe a low tier edge 2, which is cool, right? I think he'll be a reliable run defender, violence, physicality, hustle, juice, explosion. Fine. And if you can clean up some of his angles and leverage play in terms of how he comes off the ball, get him to stop playing that high, get him to stop stalling out a little bit, let him really take advantage of the length and the juice and the explosion, that would really, really, really be exciting. But I just think some of his ceiling is capped because he kind of has one direction that he can play into because of him being high cut and then having some lower body stiffness with minimal flexibility in addition to playing upright and high a bit too much. But overall, this edge grouping, Dennis says over under on Jackson sacks. Oh, Hoyt's going to miss time. I'm going to say 4.5. I'm going to say 4.5. Also, depending too, I also want to keep this caveat. It depends on what the schedule looks like too, right? Because I assume he'll see more playing time with Hoyt having that suspension in the first 6 games, but I'd like to see who they play in those first 6 games. But I think I'm going to set the over under right now on 4.5, maybe 5.5. I think over under on 4.5. Because that length and that motor will also allow him to clean up some stuff. So you can get that disruption from Sanders or Oliver or Ogunjobi or even Rousseau, and then Jackson can clean that up a little bit, which is interesting. Kent says the Bills seem to like the more straight ahead defensive ends, but still have trouble with contain. I hate to admit it, but I would like 3 linebackers once in a while. That's fair. A lot of it, some of it is scheme based, right? Like if these guys are dipping inside, they're not responsible for contain anymore. But I do think the mold that they gravitate towards, the archetype they gravitate towards are compression style rushers. They don't look for dip guys, bend guys that have great change of direction and agility. So because they don't look for guys like that, they look for more, like you said, straight line, linear. Hey, drive this tackle back into the quarterback's lap, use length, use compression, use power, all that kind of stuff, right? They want that, but that type of body type and play style doesn't really lend itself towards, if a QB tries to run, their edges usually don't have the best foot speed. and they don't have the best change of direction or agility or bend or athleticism to kind of, oh, let me put the brakes on, sink my hips a little bit and get back out and make a play. It is more upright compression style guys. So again, it's give and take. You can only have so many eggs in so many baskets. They choose to have their eggs in that type of compression style basket. John says, isn't Von Miller an outlier signing? Yes, absolutely. Even Leonard Floyd was a bit of an outlier as well. But those guys, I think they went that way just because they were proven veteran mercenary type of guys on the edge. But yes, Von Miller is an outlier at edge for them in every way, shape, and form, from a play style standpoint, from a build standpoint. I just figured they made an exception because he's Von Miller. Same thing with Leonard Floyd. Like, Leonard Floyd is a good edge rusher, so I figured they just made the exception. Kevin says, hopefully all these tall draft choices on the D-line can bat down passes regularly. That would be really, really nice. Bill says, Ant, what 11 would you like to see take the majority of first and second down snaps against the Ravens? Man, the Ravens are a unicorn and an awesome offense. I still don't think the Bills are built to stop the Ravens offense. And that's with Zay Flowers like being banged up in the playoffs. Like, all right, I think I said something in my head that I didn't say out loud just now. The Ravens offense, for as much as like Lamar shot themselves in the foot and, Terrell Bernard forces that fumble on the big Mark Andrews completion, the Ravens offense really had their way with the Bills defense. And they're a Mark Andrews drop away from tying that game. When they needed to in the second half, they had their way with the Bills on the ground and in the air. Lamar marched them right down to potentially tie it at the end. I still don't think they're a good matchup for the Ravens. I don't think there are many defenses that match up well with the Ravens, but if we're talking about how to match up with the Ravens, we'll see how they develop through the year, but I really do think it's more 3 linebacker sets or walking a safety down into the box. I think you have to beat them with numbers on the interior and just stymie them that way. You have to gap out. It's not like, oh, okay, this guy can play a gap and a half or this guy can cover 2 gaps. No, you just have to attack them from a number standpoint. I think against run-heavy teams that are good at running the ball in general, not even just the Ravens, I think the Bills still need to gap out. Basically what they did against the Lions last year, right? The idea of using numbers to defeat the run. The Bills came out against the Lions and had like 8 or 9 guys in the box on the first play, and that was the mentality they played with for the majority of the game. They were like, you are not going to run the ball on us. They were run blitzing and stunting and gapping out left, right, and center. I think that's what the Bills will have to do against the Ravens and or against any run-heavy team just because of how they're built defensively. Claude says, Philly matched up well with Baltimore. Philly also had like a rotation of 7, 8 deep dudes on the defensive line that were all sick. And then a really good secondary on top of it too. And also a really good defensive coach. Again, some teams match up well with Baltimore, and Philly is I think an exception, one of several, just given how they are built. RJ says, I think the best way to beat the Ravens is you take away the pass, let them run, and they have your offense score at least 34 points. Yeah, I don't think you're stopping the Ravens, right? Like, if you want to take the run, I do lean in that direction though. Like, take the run away and then see what happens with the pass. Not because Lamar can't pass. Like, Lamar's a great player, and a really great passer and good QB in general. But you just can't do both. You can't try to stop Derrick Henry and stop Lamar Jackson and stop the pass. Like, you got to pick one. So I'd rather just sell out against the run as a whole. And then if Lamar beats you because he threw for 460 yards and 4 touchdowns, like, it is what it is, unfortunately. But I'd rather go out that way than have Derrick Henry run for like 190 and Lamar run for 110 and Justice Hill run for 30 or 40. Like, I just don't want to die that way against the Ravens. I think Lamar still can beat you as a passer, but at least I can niche down and silo that a little bit more than having to deal with the Derrick Henry run game, the Lamar run game, all that kind of stuff. John says, just tell Lamar it's a playoff game and we'll be fine. I mean, again, I know he turned the ball over a bit against the Bills. He still balled out in that second half against the Bills and drove the ball right down the defense's throat to tie the game. And then Mark Andrews dropped that pass. Granted, it wasn't the best throw from Lamar. Andrews still should have caught it and scored, and we should have had a tie game at the end of that fourth. So, I mean, I know he hasn't played great in the playoffs, but His most recent game, he drove the Ravens right down the field to and did what he needed to do to get them into scoring position, and then they scored, and then they had a drop. So again, I know people make jokes, but I think Lamar's an awesome player, and I think some of the playoff stuff is a bit unfortunate. Oh, I forgot they got Malachi Starks. Yeah, Curtis says that Stark pick hurts. Man, Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton, oof, is a sweet combination at safety. Yeah, the Ravens got a really fun safety grouping. Oh, I love Malachi Starks. Yeah, that's super cool. Kent says at some point Henry will get old, maybe in 2030. Yeah, his off-season like workout routine is legendary. He just keeps his body in such great shape. And his diet, how much he spends on his diet and how particular he is. Yeah, he's a well-oiled and fueled machine. John says, if Lamar doesn't turn the ball over twice, we lose by double digits. You know what? Man, yeah, those turnovers, it's hard to quantify how much, but yeah, man, if he doesn't turn the ball over, because the Bills didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, feel free to, I don't think the Bills got to stop aside from the turnovers. So who knows? Maybe those drives that the turnovers happen, they continue, and maybe they miss a field goal or something else happens. But yeah, I don't think the Bills got to stop defensively aside from the takeaways, which again is part of how they played for the majority of the year. But yeah, man. No, Dennis says it's a shame that the Ravens are so good. It makes their friends even more insufferable, or their fans. I think you meant, yeah. Oh, there you go. You put fans. Yeah. You know what? I never had a problem with Ravens fans. They were very obnoxious in the playoffs, but a lot of Bills fans were obnoxious too. So I think you kind of give what you get. I think anytime you have a good football team, it's a Harvey Dent Dark Knight scenario where you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And in this sense, dying a hero means being the fan of a bad team, and live long enough to see yourself become the villain means being the fan of a team that's become good. And eventually you turn and just become obnoxious and awful. But yes, the Ravens fans are brutal, but I've seen a lot of Bills fans be brutal. The way I always see it too, like even before last season, I was like just doing my analysis of the NFL, and like I would post something about Lamar and I would just get so many Bills fans who would just come into it and just rag on Lamar left and right. That was just super unnecessary. And I think Bills fans do that to Lamar, Ravens fans do that to Josh Allen, and it's just kind of this cat chasing its tail of, a chicken egg scenario or whatever, where everybody's just sparking off the other one. But yeah, it's become a very interesting rivalry between Bills and Ravens. I don't know if it's a rivalry on the field as much as it is between the fan bases, but it's interesting how that has escalated a little bit. Good conversation piece. Thank you for that in the chat. And again, just to wrap it up with Edge, I think okay, John. Thank you, John. John says Ravens didn't punt, but they did attempt 2 field goals, so we got 2 quote unquote stops. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So yeah, I think they have improved the edge grouping. We'll see just how much. I think the floor of the edge grouping has been raised. I think the versatility and the depth is much better this year than it was last year. I think the ceiling of this group in 2025 will be tied to how much of an edge one they have as a pass rusher, whether it's Group making that jump or Bosa staying healthy and being that guy. Another position I want to talk about here is cornerback. Nothing too crazy here for the Bills, but a lot of moving and shaking at corner, highlighted by a potentially new cornerback 2 and a lot of new depth. So as of right now, Christian Benford, Max Hairston, a returning Tre'Davious White, a returning Dane Jackson, Jamarcus Ingram, Dorian Strong, rookie out of Virginia Tech, and then year 2, Daquan Hardy. This group has a lot of depth. I think they have significantly raised the floor for this group, which is very exciting, considering corner is a premium position. The ceiling for the Bills corner grouping, obviously very dependent on Max Hairston and what he gives. What I think is really interesting about the Hairston pick, and I talked about this a bit on Twitter and on some of the post-draft shows, is he brings elements that really haven't been present in this corner grouping at all, let alone like from a prevalence standpoint. Speed, juice, recovery, athleticism, quick trigger, twitch. Like he's just a different type of athlete and with a different type of speed and juice and electricity at corner than the Bills have had. He also has questions on his tackling, which is very different than what the Bills have had at corner. Granted, Tre'Davious White wasn't necessarily the best tackler coming out of LSU or even necessarily on tape, but he cleaned up some of those pieces and would come up responsibly as a force player, but wasn't the best tackler. Hairston is a very willing tackler, just smaller frame, bit of a leaner frame, doesn't lend himself, or doesn't give him a very, high margin for error when he goes into the tackle point, and then being inconsistent with his angles and decisions as a run defender, kind of all adds up together in terms of having some struggles against the run. I don't think he's ever going to be a plus run defender as a corner, but I do think the Bills can make him functional just with how much they value that aspect of playing corner and how willing Hairston is. So maybe get him to play add a little more muscle mass. Maybe if he can get to a consistent playing weight of, 190 to 194, thicken up a little bit and then clean up some of his angles and technique at the tackle point and decision-making. I think that'll go a long way for him again, because he is a willing tackler. He's just leaner, a bit smaller framed, and then inconsistent from a technique standpoint. But from a coverage standpoint, man, I'm just going to go to my evaluation here. Where is it? A zone coverage corner who wins a lot in off coverage, but has a skill set and athletic profile and some tape. I stumbled over that. His zone coverage corner who wins in off coverage, but has a skill set and athletic profile, along with some tape, to suggest he can be successful in man and press. He's got very calm and clean feet. I'm falling apart. He's got very calm and clean feet, good recovery speed. I would say plus recovery speed, plus athleticism. Again, a willing but poor tackler. Angles and decisions and run support as far as fit and force are questionable at times and inconsistent. Also flings his body more so than tries to step with same foot, same shoulder. He's able to get back in phase when fooled versus vertical routes due to his athleticism and speed. Plus short area burst. He can play the left side or the right side. Does a good job in zone collecting routes. Also has good zone spatial awareness. He's able to fall off in coverage and bait quarterbacks. Functional as a cloud corner. Functional in a deep third and cover 3. He can play some man, press, and off. He'll let wide receivers into his blind spot and can be fooled a bit at times in stems against wide receivers. And you'll see him kind of get turned around and inside out, but then that's where the athleticism comes in, because he'll get fooled and then just get back in phase because he has so much juice and speed. A strong trigger and burst to close on underneath routes, a very good twitch. Play strength will be a concern given his lean frame at the tackle point, in stems against wide receivers. Anywhere at contact, he'll fall off guys a bit. Patient when in off coverage. He trusts his eyes and his speed. He's able to sit on routes, then comfortably turn and run as needed. He keys wide receivers' hips as he turns and runs, and he has the feet and fluidity to throttle down and stay close. Hand usage in route stems to establish feel and obstruct opponents. He can be better versus back shoulder throws. You'll see him kind of get thrown by or kind of chucked a little bit, especially against bigger body type of guys. But really exciting athlete. I'm excited to see what he brings from an on-the-field perspective. And, Eric and I talked about this a bit on the Saturday morning show when we wrapped up Hairston's film when the Bills took him on that Friday night, or Thursday night. I'm sorry, the Friday morning show. I'm throwing off with my days here. We've talked so much about the Bills restricting airspace by getting, a corner 2 that can live and succeed and thrive and be effective in press man. So that way, throw off the timing. Let's get into the kitchen of these wide receivers and make life hell for them coming right off the line. I think Hairston has the potential to be that guy, or even work in some of that a bit as a rookie. But I think he can be that guy going forward with proper coaching, because he has the skill set and the profile athletically for it. But he can squeeze windows and restrict airspace in zone from off coverage because of that quick twitch and that trigger and burst that he has. So, instead of having, passes completed underneath and you don't have maybe the twitchiest athletes closing down on them from the outside, now you've got Max Hairston, who's kind of inviting those underneath throws so he can trigger on it immediately and come downhill. So I do think they've increased the opportunity at corner in conjunction with Benford to restrict airspace and squeeze windows, just in a different way than I necessarily initially thought and or hoped for, with, kind of wanting Trey Amos or that type of corner, more of a press man type of corner. But that off coverage and being able to trigger down quickly and accurately from Hairston is really impressive. It'll serve him well. Just even outbreaking routes and stuff. If as a quarterback, if you're not on time with your throw, or if the ball placement isn't where it needs to be, if it's slightly behind the receiver, or if you're slightly off with your timing, he's going to jump it. He's going to knock it down. He's going to pick it. Like, he's got real juice at corner, which is awesome to see. And again, that how he can close that space underneath with his trigger and his twitch is going to matter a lot. Also, within this corner grouping, I really like having Trey White back as CB3 or CB4, depending on how you view the other corners. He's been around the block. He knows this team. He knows the culture. He's smart as hell at corner. Similar idea for all of what I just said with Dane Jackson as well, just on a bit of a lower scale. I really like having Trey White and Dane Jackson as corner 3 and corner 4. I don't want, hold on, I got to back this up here. RJ says, well, we also got the best press man corner in the draft along with Strong. I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not. I don't think Dorian Strong is the best press man corner in the draft. I like some of what he does. I have to finish my eval on him, but I don't think he was the best press man corner in this draft. But I think somebody did. Oh, I saw that somewhere. I don't know who said that, or I don't know if RJ being sarcastic or not. I don't think he's the best press man corner in this draft. But he does do some positive things. But RJ says that was according to Greg Cosell. And no, I think Greg Cosell said his coach at Virginia Tech said that he's the best press man corner he's ever been around. I think that's what it was. Greg Cosell said that Dorian Strong's like secondary coach or defensive coordinator, one of his coaches at Virginia Tech said that Dorian Strong is the best press man corner he's ever been around, which is still a compliment, but I think that's much different than saying Cosell or a few GMs said it. Maybe a few GMs did say it. I don't know. But I think the Cosell comment was one of his coaches at Virginia Tech said he's the best press man corner he's ever been around, which is still good. You know, you want to hear that from coaches, but I also take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But I like the floor of this grouping. I like having Trey as corner 3. I like having Dane Jackson as corner 4. I hope neither of them have to be the full-time CB2 or CB1. You know, I hope Hairston and Benford pan out as a duo and a pairing from a health standpoint and from an effectiveness standpoint. And then you can just have Trey and Dane Jackson be real quality safety nets. Like, that would be super awesome to have. And then after that, you've got Jamarcus Ingram, who's got some inside-outside versatility. You've got Dorian Strong. You've got Daquan Hardy, who I liked last year. We'll see what he can be. I think you've really significantly raised the floor at corner, and then the ceiling could really be raised depending on what Max Hairston is. And we'll see what that is, you know, as a rookie or what he is going forward. But I like this corner grouping, how it's shaped up as a unit, what you can do schematically. I think now that you've got an athlete like Hairston with the zone coverage chops and even the athletic profile and skill set to play a bit of man, even though he's not the biggest guy and he's going to have to be sharp with his technique and his reads because he will get flung around a bit. You've got the opportunity to play a bit more single high coverages in terms of both cover 3 and cover 1, which is man coverage on the outside, and then use that other safety to help play the run, to fit the run either post-snap and trigger down and buzz down, or be in the box from a pre-snap alignment or decision, because you've got two corners on the outside in Benford and Hairston that allow you to kind of live on islands a bit more and use more bodies to play the run. I think that will go a long way towards helping the run defense this year. Again, I still don't think they're built to defend the run from light boxes, given how light they are on the interior and how smaller they are at the second level with Bernard, Milano, and even Taron Johnson, and being a nickel defense and all that kind of stuff. So I think their best way to defend the run is with numbers. And you can feel more comfortable committing a safety to the box if you've got corners like Benford and Hairston on the outside, guys who can, play one-on-one and live one-on-one a bit. John come in with some snark saying Easter's over, by the way. John, I spoke about this in the beginning. I did not update the background. It'll be updated for a Memorial Day theme, considering the holiday that's here this month. But I decided to leave the Easter stuff up, one, because I really like this decor behind me, but also two, so I thought the pastels worked well for Mother's Day, which is this weekend. So I appreciate you acknowledging the background and your snark as well. Anthony says, I believe in Joe Hendry. I like that. Nice wrestling reference. Well done. Yeah, so I like what this corner grouping is. I'm really interested to see kind of what happens for CB5 and even maybe CB4, like Ingram, Strong, maybe even Hardy. Like, who wins that CB5 spot? Do any of those guys push Dane Jackson out as CB4? Because also within that too, like right now for this year, 2025, CB3 and CB4, I expect to be some combination of Trey White and Dane Jackson. But Both those guys are on 1-year deals. So in an ideal world, maybe one of the younger guys, Ingram, Strong, Hardy, maybe particularly Strong, if one of those guys can win the CB4 job, then maybe that's your CB3 next year again. So I think camp in the preseason is going to be really interesting for the bottom of the depth chart at corner, because not only do I think those guys are staking a claim to a spot this year in 2025, but I think they're also potentially staking a claim and planting a flag to be CB3 next year once Trey and Dane are gone, which will be really, really interesting. John says, sorry, missed the beginning. It's only 11 short months away. Fair enough. Fair enough. Dennis says, can Harrison blitz? Yeah, you can blitz him off the corner. He's got the speed and the juice for it. It's just going to be a matter of, can he bring the quarterback down because of, again, size, frame, angles, all that type of stuff. If he gets chipped a little by a tight end or a running back, he might get run around the arc and kind of pushed around the QB, but he's got the speed and the juice and the tenacity for it, which will be fun. Todd says, Anthony, what draft pick was the biggest steal for the Bills this year? Oh, it's tough. If Jackson pans out, it's probably Landon Jackson, because they got him in the third and technically like they traded down and got him. Right now, I'm just going with Jordan Hancock, because I think his versatility and the athleticism that he brings as like a depth safety and a depth nickel guy, and where they got him on day 3 in the 5th round, I think that, even though, again, that might not be sexy and it's a day 3 guy, but that would be my vote. If Jackson pans out, it's probably Jackson. But yeah, Kevin says, can Hancock be a good safety? I hope so. I see him more as a box guy and a nickel defender, more of a slot and apex who can do some safety stuff. I think he can live in split field coverages, but he's at his best in and around the line of scrimmage and the box, kind of just going forward, left and right, and just being big and athletic. Todd says, do you think Hancock will push Lewis out? I think he has a chance to, and that's really saying something, because I think Cam Lewis put a good season together last year, and he's proven to be a quality guy for them. But man, Hancock has the size and the athleticism and the physicality that I think could really do a lot for this defense. I also think what's interesting too, like, can he function enough at safety? Does he get enough looks at safety in camp and do well enough there that they move on from DeMar Hamlin or a Derek Forrest? I think Derek Forrest is a real dark horse to be the starting safety opposite of Taylor Rapp. That's a conversation for another time. Yeah, I think Hancock is I think Hancock has the chance to push somebody out. It could be Cam Lewis. It could be DeMar Hamlin. I like Hancock's tape. I think I said it when I was on the Rockpile Report last week. Hancock was a guy who I watched a ton of Ohio State tape this draft cycle, offense and defense, but especially defensively, between Tyreek Williams and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Cody Simon. And then I really love Caleb Downs, who will be draft eligible next year. So I was watching tape for him. And Jordan Hancock was number 7. And I kept seeing 7 flash. Like, he would just make plays. Like, he'd make a really good hit. It wasn't a ton. Like, he's not doing it like 5 to 6 times a game. But every game I watched, he would flash in some way. And I told myself to go down, or I wrote down, I told myself to go back and watch Hancock's like tape or figure out who 7 was. And I just never had the time, and I never went back and did it. And it was so funny when they drafted him, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's 7. And it was cool to go back and watch his tape, because he flashed a bunch in the pre-draft process. I just never went into the eval because I never had the time for it, because he was down the board more. But I thought it was a cool pick on day 3. I think he has a chance to push out Lewis or push out Hamlin. He has true like safety and slot versatility. I think more slot and apex than he does safety, but that's a roster spot. He's got good athleticism. He's got good juice. He's got some size to him, like 6'1" and 195. So I think he's got a dude that gives you an opportunity from a roster saving standpoint, because he special team snaps, backup nickel, maybe a depth safety. Like, you get 3 roster spots in one, and he's got some versatility to do that. Could see that. Could see that. Adam says, who's our best one high safety? I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I think Taylor Rapp is the best single high safety. Honestly, it might be Derek Forrest. I think Taylor Rapp is the best from a reading the game standpoint mentally, but he's not the most athletic and doesn't have the best foot speed. Bishop is the best single high safety from an athletic profile standpoint, but doesn't have the, between the ears and the mental side of it like Rapp does. And then you've got Forrest, who I think has some of the athleticism, but also some of the ability to read and diagnose. So it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in a multitude of ways. It might be Forrest because he's like the best of both worlds combined, whereas Rap is strong in one and deficient in another, and then Bishop is strong in one and deficient in another. So it might be Derek Forrest, which might sound crazy and might be awesome or terrible, depending on what that makes you think of the safety room. And then Ron says Hancock has more speed in the secondary, something the defense needs. Yes, he had speed. He had speed and juice and pop and a little bit of size, which is nice to have in the secondary in general. And you can deploy him in different ways, which is fun. So, yeah, I like that Hancock signing. Or drafting, I should say. But, yeah, so at corner, to kind of wrap up the corner grouping, I think the Bills have improved here at corner as well. Last year, it was Benford and Douglas, and then Kyer was your three. I think Trey White, as of right now, even though I know Trey White isn't the sexiest, I think Trey White is a better CB3 than Kyer Elam. I have more faith in Trey White, even though his tape wasn't the sexiest. But, I mean, I don't have faith in Kyer Elam from a down-to-down standpoint anyway. So it might be another 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But I like Trey there. Hairston is obviously a projection. We don't know what Rasul Douglas or how Hairston will be compared to what Douglas was last year, but from an athletic profile standpoint and what it means schematically, I like that as well. And then overall, I just like the depth. So I think it might be a bit of a push if corner as a whole is better, but I think the floor has been raised, the depth has been raised, and the athletic profile has been raised, which is really, 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 really fun to have at corner. RJ says, meanwhile, the Ravens have both Starks and Hamilton. That team will be impossible to beat. They're going to be a hard squad to beat, man. I mean, they were a hard squad to beat in the playoffs last year. They're going to be a tough out every single year. They're a really good team, which is unfortunate for the Bills. John says, really looking forward to training camp because D-line, CB, and safety will have a bunch of competition. Absolutely. Ken says, I have confidence in Bishop. He just needs to learn to be a pro. That's fair. Last position I want to talk about, I mentioned linebacker a little bit. I'm interested to kind of see just what the linebacker grouping is this year from a usage standpoint. Do we continue to see Dorian Williams getting some work as that third linebacker? Can anybody supplant Balin Spector as linebacker 4? I don't think there's too much here aside from just, Dorian Williams is your linebacker 3. If anything happens to Millard, I combine names again. If anything happens to Milano or Bernard, he's that next guy who steps in. If they go with 3 linebackers, it's Dorian Williams. We'll see how he continues to trend and what his trajectory looks like. I still do think he has room for improvement and growth and wasn't this amazing stud like a lot of people bill him out to be last year, but he showed a lot of improvement from year 1 to year 2. I'm interested to see what he becomes in year 3. But linebackers a bit of set it and forget it, really, with the top 3, unless, no jinx injuries happen. Safety is one I want to touch on briefly. Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop, Damar Hamlin, Derek Forrest, maybe Jordan Hancock, depending on how the Bills view him or where they want to deploy him. I do think Taylor Rapp starts. I think the Bills want Cole Bishop as safety 2, but I think it's a legitimate 3-man race to see who the other starting safety is. If you told me Cole Bishop wins it, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me Damar Hamlin wins it, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me Derek Forrest wins it, I wouldn't be surprised. Hell, even if it's a different combination, if it's Bishop and Forrest, if it's Forrest and Rapp, if it's Rapp and Hamlin, if it's Hamlin and Forrest, like you could make a case that any one of those guys could be the combination of the pairing. I do think Rapp has the inside track to be a starter, and I do think they want Bishop to win the other job, but I do think it's a legitimate competition. I would not be surprised if Derek Forrest starts. I liked his tape more than I thought I would. I'm also maybe a little biased. I liked his tape at Cincinnati coming out several years ago. Safety is going to be a battle and a fun one. We'll see. And again, who knows what would have happened last year if Cole Bishop didn't get hurt in training camp. And if he does this year, is it Hamlin again? I put a tweet out earlier today that was kind of surprising. Damar Hamlin led the Bills defense in snaps and snaps per game in 2024. Like they just like him and feel comfortable at safety, as unsexy as he may be. I would like Bishop to win the job. I would, like Forrest to potentially win the job. Hamlin would be my 4th option in terms of starters, but he is reliable and responsible, and I do get it. I like the safeties individually more than I do as a pairing and as a duo. I've spoken about it a ton on the show. I just don't think, I think, Bishop and Rapp specifically, both of their skill sets lean towards being better in and around the box and around the line of scrimmage. But neither are the best, like, single high option. Like I mentioned earlier, Bishop has the range for it, but doesn't have the processing and the eyes yet for it. We'll see if he does in year 2. Rapp has the eyes and the processing for it, but doesn't necessarily have the range and the athleticism for it. Rapp is better around the box, but so is Bishop. Bishop's also more athletic in around the box to cover tight ends and cover receivers, but he's got to, again, be able to understand leverage and spacing the way Rapp does. It's just weird how they just coalesce into a unit. I don't really dislike any player individually. I still don't think Cole Bishop was an ideal fit for the Bills defense. I don't want to get into that too much. I've spoken about it so much on the show, so we'll see what he is in year 2. I think safety's interesting, just as a grouping and as a pairing. I think you can make a case for a multitude of combinations starting at safety coming out. Again, if you told me there was any combination of those 4 guys, or I don't know, if Jordan Hancock balls out and wins a spot, I think that's further down the list. But yeah, it's interesting for me. Ron says Bishop and Forrest should start. Fair enough. Kent says, great point. To me, the safeties don't match well. Yeah, it's interesting just how they all mesh together. But I mean, I don't think Hamlin and Rapp meshed well either. You didn't need, neither of those guys were rangy guys. Neither of those guys were ball hawks, plays on the ball type of guys. They also kind of like what they like in the secondary, or at safety, I should say. Cole Bishop is a bit of an outlier with how much of an athletic profile he had, and then how he played, what kind of defense he came from at Utah. And again, he was more of a monster man in and around the line of scrimmage, like apex. Sometimes he's dropping deep, but he was just all around the box in the line of scrimmage. Now he's having to play more deep and more split field stuff with the Bills and more pro style coverage. So it's just interesting how everything kind of comes together at that safety spot. I do think, the pairings, I just don't know how well they complement each other. Any of the pairings, honestly, the best pairing is probably like Forrest and Rapp or Forrest and Bishop, which might be crazy unless Bishop takes a step in his processing and how he sees the game. Then it could still be Bishop and Rapp. But competition, it'll be fun in camp to see that. Cam Morey says, did Hamlin lead in snaps because he played through the blowouts while others sat? Maybe. And also too, like Taylor Rapp got hurt for a little bit. Bernard missed some time with injury. So yeah, there are some variables that were thrown in there, but I just wasn't expecting to see Damar Hamlin as the leading snap getter from a snaps per game and volume standpoint. Bit of a surprise. Maybe not surprising to anyone else, but it was surprising to me. RJ says, would people feel better about Hamlin if he didn't have 3 turnovers taken away by officiating? I personally wouldn't. I don't even think of that when it comes to my evaluation of him. It's just his skill set and the traits that he has and what it means for the defense in terms of how they can play. I just think your ceiling is very capped if Damar Hamlin is starting. If Damar Hamlin is your starting safety, I think like that means that you need to be loaded everywhere else on defense. And I just didn't think the Bills were. I don't even know if the Bills are now. So for me, no, that doesn't influence me, but it might for others. Adam says, Cole Bishop's play on Worthy was impressive. Never know how they called it a catch. 2 things. I'm fine with it being a catch. I do think even though it touched the ground a bit, it was trapped and secured. It was a good play by Bishop, but also it should have never gotten to that point where it doesn't have to be reviewed. Is it a catch? Bishop saw it. He should have made a better play on the ball. It was a good play by Bishop, but I fault him for not making a clear and decisive stop with that ball in the air. Like he should have made that play. But overall, the jump and everything was impressive. Ron, I saw your comment earlier and I started. Ron says, do you think we need to add a linebacker? And then I'll tie this in with your other question, Ron, saying, what position groups do you still see us adding a player or 2? I could see them adding a linebacker potentially. Just if they don't feel great with Spector being linebacker 4, maybe he's not linebacker 4. Maybe it is, Ulofoshio or it's Joe Andreessen, but I could see them adding a linebacker. I could also see them adding someone on the defensive line, not necessarily like a high priority guy, but just a camp body, or somebody for, the down the road, given the suspensions or things like that. But on the defensive side of the ball, I really do think they're set for the most part. I wouldn't rule out a linebacker. I don't think safety, although that's got a possibility. I really think it would be kind of a linebacker. K. Morey says maybe they see Hoyt as sort of a linebacker. I do think you could get some linebacker reps out of him on third downs and rush situations, but I don't think he's an every down, like off ball, down to down linebacker where he's going to play coverage and he's going to be doing things like that. But I do think they could use him as a quasi linebacker in different pieces and places. Kent says, I'm pretty sure the Bills have no money. Yeah, they're strapped to the cap, but there's always ways to fit in like a veteran here or there, like a 1 year, $2 million type of deal, $3 million type of deal, void years, how you spread it out and prorate it and all that kind of stuff. So if they wanted to sign somebody, they could. I think it would be more of if they add a player or two, I think it's going to be more of a cheaper camp body depth guy trying to add somebody and kind of go from there. Carl says, Hyde and Poyer both seem to have high football IQs. They did. And played well together as they knew where the other would be. Which safeties would work the best together and be where they need to be instinctively? Wow. Good question. Forrest and Rapp? If you're going off of football IQ and talking about like knowing where the other will be and work the best together. Okay, let me unpack this. Football IQ and knowing where the other will be, it's either Rapp and Forrest or Rapp and Hamlin. Working the best together, that's going to be very, like I talked about earlier, based on skill set. Where they need to be instinctively, yeah, you can make a case for really any kind of pairing. K. Morris says Malachi Starks and Javon Holland. That's funny. Yeah, I really do think overall, to kind of answer this question, I know I bucketed it a bit. If you're just talking about knowing working together and knowing where the other's going to be, it's Rapp and Hamlin. Because Hamlin's very responsible. He's where you know where he's going to be. He's not going to be out of place. He's not looking to jump something. He's not trying to go rogue and make a play on the ball or, bite on this and try and trigger and make a play. He's going to play his job safely and responsibly. Rapp does that as well, just with a little more force and a little more anticipation and a little more athleticism. Bishop, I think, is not there yet from a football IQ. Not from, I shouldn't say football IQ, from a processing standpoint, given how he's still adjusting to playing further away from the line. I think is really the most intriguing one, and I would put him into this conversation. That's a really good question, Carl. I appreciate that. Ken says Bishop has the upside to play him to gain the IQ. That is true. More time on task should, in theory, get him more up to speed. The more he sees the game with real snaps, whether it's in camp, preseason, regular season snaps, the more he's actually getting, live bullets experience playing further away from the line of scrimmage. And in this defense, in theory, the better it will make him. The question is that trade-off, letting him get that time on task, is it better or more beneficial than having somebody who might be ahead of him now, maybe like Forrest or even Hamlin, depending on how you view these guys? Safety is going to be really interesting. It really all comes down to just where Cole Bishop is from a processing standpoint, because he's got the athleticism. It's just a matter of how well he can play within the scheme and structure and within a responsibility and assignment sound standpoint. It's so funny too. Like Hamlin is so assignment sound, but just doesn't have the athleticism or the juice. And then Bishop has the athleticism and the juice, but just isn't assignment sound yet. And it's just so funny, like how they built this room. And Hamlin's not going to take a jump athletically. So you're hoping that Bishop takes a jump from a processing standpoint. We'll see. It'll be pretty fun. But overall, how much better will the Bills defense be in 2025? I want to use this episode to kind of set the table. We're going to be getting into more schematic things going forward, individual player looks, and some tape and schematics and metrics as we go forward this offseason on the show here. But I wanted to use this one to kind of set the table for that. And I do think that Bills defense will be better in 2025. I do still think displacement against the run will be an issue. I do think there's going to be an issue with, through the spine of guys getting knocked off the ball laterally and vertically. I do think the best way to correct for that is by gapping out and using numbers to stop the run. I do think they're better from an inside rush standpoint. I do think they're better from a juice and violence standpoint and penetration standpoint on the inside. So for a team that already created a lot of chaos and havoc, I think they are set up more for that this year, given having Sanders and Ogunjobi, even though Ogunjobi's going to miss 6 games, given that building on the inside instead of having Austin Johnson and Dwayne Carter. And then we talked about what the edge grouping is. I like the versatility. I like the depth. I think you've got a bunch of like B- and B guys. Maybe you have a couple B pluses. Maybe you have an A or an A- or 2 A-, depending on what Bosa can be. It'll be really interesting to kind of see what they do. And then I think corner, like we just, finished talking about. I think corner got a bit of a facelift and a change with Max Hairston, but also upgrades from a depth standpoint and from a functional depth standpoint. So on paper, I do think the Bills defense is better in 2025 in a multitude of ways than they were in 2024. Schematically, we'll dive into that in further episodes going forward. But my interest is peaked, and I am hopeful given kind of how they built this grouping out, and what they've done and how things are kind of coalescing into one, in a multitude of ways. But I think this grouping has potential to ease a lot of the struggles or mitigate some of the struggles they've had in years past. I still think displacement's going to be an issue. I still think they're going to struggle against the run at times, depending on the opponent, depending on the matchup. But you could say that for a lot of defenses, to play devil's advocate. Their best option against the run is still going to be penetrating and getting, a stop for a loss. Or if you want to be assignment sound, it's going to be gapping out and using numbers and making sure they have a body for every single gap that the offense has, which they could do if they walk safeties down pre-snap or spin them down post-snap because they have corners on the outside in Benford and Hairston that they think can live one-on-one. A lot of fun schematic conversations going forward, but I do think this Bills defense is better on paper in 2025 than they were in 2024, and I think they have a lot more schematic potential in 2025 than they did in 2024. They didn't ease my biggest concern, again, which was displacement in the spine against the run, but they can mitigate it a bit and succeed in some other areas that may offset that or balance that out. Speaking of balance, you know what balance is awesome? One Pie Pizzas, when they put them in the pizza box for you to take home. The sponsor of the show, I talk about them every week because they are the sponsor of the show. The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I do think they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. The pizza hits so much. If you get different toppings, they chop them up. Like if you get different veggies or whatever toppings, they'll chop them up and sprinkle them evenly across the whole pie. A lot of different sizing options. Like they make a really good pizza and really great blue cheese. It's absolutely fantastic. And I talk about all the time, all the good they do for the community, partnering with Roswell, partnering with the SPCA, Toys for Tots, partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation. They do a lot of good for your taste buds, but also a lot of good for the community. So go get yourselves One Pie Pizza. And I talk about all the time how they do like catering options. They have like an official catering division now. It's called Elevated Catering of Buffalo. Similar logo to the One Pie Pizza logo that you see in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Their catering stuff is awesome, especially the mac and cheeses. I've had them cater stuff for me going back to last summer. Their food is fantastic. So if you're doing a graduation party or something for the summer or a cookout or a birthday or just anything you're doing in the summer, check out Elevated Catering of Buffalo. That is their catering division. The food bangs. It's so good. And you can still get pizza on top of it. So like you could get the One Pie Pizza and then some of their catering stuff. Like get some of their mac and cheeses and the pizza and you're set. Just really great food, really great stuff. Their breakfast pizzas are also crazy good. I know if you live in the Buffalo area, Tops has a great breakfast pizza. One Pie has a banging breakfast pizza. So get yourself a breakfast pizza if that's your thing as well. Whatever you pick, you won't be sorry. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza, the best in Buffalo, New York. If you have not already, please, and then you drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. They significantly boost the algorithm and the channel and the show. So if you haven't already and you enjoyed this video, please, and then you drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Oh, RJ says, I think I'm going to email One Pie Pizza once a week to set up a location in Rochester. Do it, man. Do it. I'll support you. I will support you. And also a question from RJ. RJ says, historically, when a team has this many changes on defense, does it take a while for them to gel? Oh, historically, I think it depends. It depends on how, which is, I know it's probably a cop-out answer, but it depends on the schematic fit for the players. Because it's not just the changes, it's the schematic fit on top of it. And I think with what the Bills have, there's not a lot of schematic changes. Like TJ Sanders is a change. He's a scheme fit. Landon Jackson is a change. He's a scheme fit. Larry Ogunjobi is a change. He's a scheme fit. Bosa is a scheme fit. Max Hairston Bit of an outlier for them, but also because of how well he plays in zone, also kind of a scheme fit. So I don't think it'll take too long for them to gel because they are scheme fits and there's familiarity. There's not too many round pegs in a square hole happening here. It might not be the perfect or most seamless fit, but they are very close. I think they picked a lot of guys who have the skill sets that they value, but also fit some of the archetypes in upgraded ways. And if they have skill sets that are new or traits that are new that they value, like Hairston, they still do fit enough of the archetype from a zone coverage standpoint to succeed and fit. So I think that's fair. Carl showing some love for Tre'Davious White. Very, 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 very. Yeah, very good. I was pumped to see Trey White come back. It sucked to see him go out the way he did. So I'm happy to have him back. Kent says, I dig the fact you say on paper, humble, this moment won't stop. We're going to win one and we will do it with McDermott. Go Bills. Man, I really hope so. I would like to not be heartbroken every year. I'm also a Barcelona fan and I am just absolutely gutted today with how Barcelona lost against Inter Milan. So yeah, man, yeah, tough. Oh, I like what Curtis says. Curtis says what you should do is watch this show on YouTube TV and then watch on your phone with a separate account and like and subscribe on both. I can't say it any better. You're a genius. And not even an evil genius, like a good, kind, benevolent genius. I appreciate this for Curtis. I appreciate you for this, Curtis. Thank you for being here. And thank you for that. Yeah. RJ saying, I know it usually takes less time on offense to gel than defense historically. I think I heard that from Aaron Schatz forever ago. Oh, maybe. I guess it also, yeah. Offense too depend. For me, it's all scheme and verbiage. And what do you come from a similar defense? Do you come from a similar offense? Like, are you going from a run blocking role as a receiver to more of like a spread slot outside type of role? Like, are you going from an X to a Z? Are you going from a Z to primarily a slot? Are you playing more condensed? There's so many variables within it, but the schematic fit is always the biggest and most important thing. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we are starting to wind down and are going to say goodbye. Again, if you have not already dropped a like on this video, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video if you have not already done so. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too and very much appreciated. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on whatever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. That's huge for the algorithm there as well. Like if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever, if you can subscribe, if you can leave a rating, even if it's just like, hey, here's a quick 5 stars, but if it's like actually like genuine, that means even more to me. Or if you have actual feedback and you want to actually give me feedback of things you like about the show, things you want to see more of, things I can improve, include that as well. I'm welcome to anything and everything in terms of positive feedback, constructive, whatever you got. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode. Again, if you're on YouTube, turn on the notifications for the Disguise Coverage playlist. Subscribe to the Cover One channel. We have you covered pretty much every single day of the week with various levels of content. I appreciate the kind words coming in for me in the chat. Thank you very much. I saw them coming in throughout the episode. I don't like to pull up too many or really any positive things for me, especially when I'm solo, because I think it's corny, but I see all the kind words and that feedback, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much for those of you that are putting that stuff into the chat. If you enjoyed this episode or you enjoy this show or you enjoy this content, please tell your family and friends and loved ones about it, whether they're Bills fans, football fans, whatever have you. If you hated this episode or you hate me or you hate this content, tell your enemies about this show or this channel and try and ruin their day by making them watch it. No film room this week because Eric is still on vacation. We will see what the content looks like for the film room starting next week. And then I'm staying fluid here on Disguise Coverage. I may be adding some extra content with some offline recorded videos. I might do some extra live recorded stuff. And then diving into, I really want to get a lot of the schematic stuff fleshed out on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, but also diving into some specific individual player profiles and evaluations for both new guys and guys who will matter in 2025 and have some question marks around them. So a lot of content coming from me going forward. If you want more, or if there's anything I didn't cover in this episode or didn't answer for you in this episode, get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. It's pro2_ANT. Get at me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. Or if you are a Cover One insider, get at me on the Discord, at me in whatever the channels, or just DM me right there, or DM me on the socials, whatever you got. I appreciate you folks and all the kind words. I saw a couple more kind words came in. Thank you very much. Appreciate you folks. Yeah. Thank you very much. John said, great show. Happy Easter. Thanks. Well done. I'll change it to Memorial Day stuff next week, I think. But yeah, thank you for everybody who tuned in. I significantly appreciate you folks. Thank you very much, Carl, for your super chat from earlier. And yeah, thank you for everybody who tuned in live. Even if you didn't watch live, if you watched later, listen later, whatever form or fashion your episode consumption comes in, listening, watching, downloading, whatever have you, I'm greatly appreciative and thankful for it. But I really do always do appreciate the live viewers as well. It's nice to, see the live viewer count going up as the episode goes on and staying and peaking and then peaking and staying at high numbers, but also just seeing the chat going back and forth and you folks asking me stuff, engaging with me, engaging with one another. It's just a super cool thing and it's very rewarding. So thank you very much to everybody who tuned in live and whatever form or fashion your episode consumption comes in. I'm greatly thankful for it, greatly appreciative of it. Thank you for all the kind words. And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I'll see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.